In 2019, Martin Scorsese lit the filmmaking world on fire by making the claim that Marvel films are not cinema and instead likened them to theme parks instead of meaningful cinematic experiences. Since then, the debate has raged on and only gotten worse since Marvel has released more and more films, and many of those have been underperforming films. Obviously, Martin Scorsese is entitled to his own opinion, and he is more than qualified to make that opinion than most people. But this has been a debate that has gone on long enough in the filmmaking community, and after the release of the film Deadpool and Wolverine, I think it's time we finally settled the debate. Are Marvel movies cinema? Well, I'm Josh from Just MASH. Let's figure it out. Now, before I give my full answer here, I would like to kind of attack this on a point-by-point basis, starting with the theme park argument. Exciting or suspenseful films have always been described as a roller coaster experience, so I don't necessarily see why this is a negative thing other than the fact that Martin Scorsese meant it negatively. And really, a day at the theme park is supposed to be one full of excitement and thrills and fun and memories, and honestly, I think that's what action and fantasy films should strive to be anyway. The problem is when we get these films that have thrill without substance, or they sacrifice story or emotion for fan service or cameos. That is kind of when we lean more towards the negative idea of a theme park experience and not an actual cinematic experience. At this point in the MCU, if you aren't a comic book fan or just a Marvel loyalist, it is kind of hard to get into the stories or have an emotional connection to things just because there's so much back-end homework required. By doing that, it makes the films a lot less accessible, and then I can understand the argument of that kind of spitting in the face of what film is supposed to be. People point to that serialized format of the MCU and the episodic nature of the way that they tell stories and look at it as a bad thing. Honestly, I disagree. I think of it as a good thing because people also kind of like to say that the MCU doesn't tell stories, there's not emotion or anything, but I think when you look at the arcs of Iron Man and Tony Stark and Captain America, Steve Rogers, it really kind of proves that argument wrong. It can't be denied that seeing these characters show up multiple times over multiple years in everybody's films really kind of gave us more of a connection to those characters and really fleshed out the universe in a more meaningful way. Another main complaint that people have about Marvel is the cameos and the nature of them, but honestly, I think the way that we kind of discuss this topic is just blatantly incorrect. People point to the Spider-Man in No Way Home. People point to the Illuminati in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. People point to the Fox crew in Deadpool and Wolverine, and honestly mislabel these roles as cameos. A cameo, generally speaking, is a character that shows up in one scene of a movie, has minimal dialogue, and does not affect the plot pretty much in any way, and ultimately is a worthless situation. That is not what these situations are. When you look at the Spider-Man in No Way Home, the Illuminati in Doctor Strange, and the Fox crew in Deadpool and Wolverine, these are characters that are not making cameos. These are characters that have meaningful arcs, they appear in multiple scenes, they have plenty of dialogue, and their actions really influence the plot of the film and affect the main characters in those films. The cameos that we should be kind of having a problem with are Star Fox in the Eternals, Clea in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, and Hercules in Thor Love and Thunder. Not that these characters can't do something meaningful in the future, but as of right now, they've shown up, have not been seen again, and ultimately the scenes weren't really good, and in this case of Doctor Strange, negatively affected the story of that film. Sometimes characters do show up for fan service, but like I said earlier, I do think most of the arcs in the MCU have been meaningful ones. They've been roles that have actually meant something to the fans and to the actors and have shown that they can tell stories in meaningful ways. But with the return of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine and the announcement of Robert Downey Jr. coming back to the MCU as Dr. Doom, I think we kind of start to veer into the territory of the question of, is culture eating itself? And I do think that's a valid question, and I do think them two specifically kind of play into that, but ultimately I disagree in those examples. Hugh Jackman, for one, at least in Deadpool and Wolverine, which I didn't love the film, but I really liked Hugh Jackman's role in it. I felt like it was really recognizing his legacy and what he's meant to culture, while also moving the role forward and not so much just resting on the laurels of the character. We saw tons of different Wolverine iterations that we've always wanted to see, but were robbed of in the Fox universe, and we've got to see the character actually have development in this film and be different from the way he was when he came in. As for Downey Jr., it's still too early to tell because nothing at all has happened. Ultimately, I think Downey Jr. as Doom is a neat idea. It's one that could afford some really creative storytelling opportunities, but ultimately that's just up to them how they handle it. Now, the other argument that people like Martin Scorsese, and a lot of people actually have made the argument for, is that the Marvel filmmaking process has negatively affected the filmmaking industry. Things like more chaotic productions, an over-reliance on CGI and the abuse of CGI artists, pretty much having no sets and bad lighting, are negative filmmaking practices that have trickled down into the filmmaking community and have made a lot of movies a lot worse than they would have been 10, 20 years ago. I do think that's a valid point, and it's something that I agree with, but at the same time, if we're looking at the things that Marvel have done negatively, we also have to look at the things they've done positively for the film industry. Numerous people have come out in support of Marvel and said that Marvel movies are what keeps the theater industry alive. There are plenty of people that only go to the movie theater 2 or 3 times a year, and they go to see Marvel movies. Without these giant tentpole Marvel features, a lot of movie theaters would not be open anymore. A lot of the points I've made are small parts in a larger discussion that has to do with a lot more than Marvel, but specifically today the question is, are Marvel movies cinema? And to me, the answer is, and has always been, yes, they are. The real issue is that there's a lot more nuance to this discussion than people are willing to give it. People want to treat it as team sports, they want to pick sides, they want to get their feelings hurt, they want to defend themselves, they want to defend their interests, they want to attack others, and that's kind of the problem here. It's not actually a discussion about art and what it means, it's how it's made. It's more just attacking people for what they like or don't like. I think saying that a certain type of film is or isn't cinema is kind of looking at it from an elitist perspective. It's sitting on a high horse, and ultimately approaching anything with that sort of viewpoint is something that makes me lose respect for them in the film space. Now, that is not a shot at Martin Scorsese. He is maybe the greatest living filmmaker, one of the most qualified people to speak on cinema, but he himself has said that he's never actually watched a Marvel movie. So why do we really care what he thinks about them if he hasn't seen them? I think part of the problem is that Marty was a bit misrepresented in the sense that maybe he doesn't actually understand what Marvel movies are and just kind of conflated them with comic book movies or large-scale action movies that aren't that good. Add it to the fact that there is market confusion surrounding what a Marvel movie is now with the awful Sony films. It's kind of a different discussion about what is a Marvel movie. With that being said, obviously, I'm a huge nerd. I'm a movie nerd. I'm a comic book nerd. The MCU is everything I've dreamt of since I was a kid. But that does not mean that I'm going to blindly love or support every production that they put out. Some Marvel films that have been released, to me, are absolute masterpieces, and some of them are films that are so bad that I was embarrassed to say that I'm a Marvel fan. I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think that we can look at these films, judge and treat them individually as they are, as individual art pieces, and not really be embarrassed for liking or disliking any of them. To me, you're not a lesser film fan if you dislike Marvel. You're not a greater film fan if you do like Marvel. I love the Captain America trilogy. I love Infinity War and Endgame. I love the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. But I also love Stanley Kubrick and the Criterion Collection and international films, and I love the Oscars every year. If liking Marvel movies makes me less of a film fan, well, then I guess I'm less of a film fan. But ultimately, it's hard for me to care what other people think about me or the perception that they have of me as a film fan just because I like Marvel movies. Really, there's 40 Marvel movies. If you can't find one you like in there, I personally don't think the movies are the issue. But if you don't like them, it's fine. You don't have to like them. It doesn't have to be an either-or situation. But ultimately, I think we can all just be a bit nicer in the way that we approach these things and realize that just because we like or dislike something does not make it good or bad, nor does it make it more valid or less valid. Either way, whatever you think about Marvel movies, let me know in the comments below. Let me know if you love them, if you hate them, what you think about Martin Scorsese and his contributions to the discussion. I've been Josh from Just Mash. Until next time.